So, Matt, last night I was watching this nature documentary, which I do a lot, and I learned something new about flamingos.
Okay.
So, you know how flamingos stand on one leg? Like they'll just stand there and pull one leg up?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason they do that is because if they pulled both up, they'd fall.
Yeah, it's funny how that works, right?
Good.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Graveyard. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Adam.
And my name's Matt.
Now, pull up a tombstone or settle into your casket and get comfortable because this is Graveyard Tales. All right, everybody, here we are again. Matt, how you doing tonight, brother?
I'm not too bad.
Good. So before we get into it, go over to patreon.com/Graveyard Tales and sign up to become a patron. We've got multiple different levels. And if you think to yourself, you know what? I love Adam and Matt, and I just don't get enough of them a week. Well, then here is your chance. Patreon.com/Graveyard Tales. We have a huge back catalog of episodes that we've been doing for years. Yeah. So you're going to be hard pressed to run out of episodes. Every week we do a bonus short episode that all levels get. And the $5 and $10, they get the video versions of those. Also our $5 and $10, they get the ad-free audio and video versions of the main episode. And our $10 get all of that plus our second show side quest, which we are loving doing. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to give it away, but tonight I have a great side quest episode that we're going to be recording after this main episode that I can't wait to get through. We got to get through this main episode so that we can do this side quest, man.
Right.
But go over there, check it out, sign up. Your patronage means a lot to me and Matt, because not only does it mean that you appreciate us, but you're also the reason that we can keep going, because we've hit rough patches, and your contributions help Matt and I continue the show, buy the equipment that we need when it fails, because inevitably this is electronics and electronics hate me and we have to get new ones. So patreon.com/Graveyard Tales, if you don't mind. Also, go down in our show notes, find our sponsor links, and go get you something cool with our sponsor links. We take on sponsors that we like and enjoy, and we know that you will too. So go down there, click the link, use our promo code, get you a discount. You can also get a discount on Cowboy Revolution Apparel with my code, which will be down in the show notes as well. Get you a cowboy hat. Quote unquote cowboy hat. All right. So that's all I've got for the housekeeping. And I know everybody's going, thank God, get on with it. You talk too much. But tell us, Matt, what are we talking about tonight, brother?
Okay. So tonight we are going to talk about a place that is often referred to as one of the most haunted places in France. And I know it's another one of these, this is the most haunted whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But this place is really interesting because it's got such a rich medieval history.
Mm-hmm.
And how many places have we talked about that have this wild medieval history and they turn out to be haunted as all get out?
Right.
You know?
Right.
And this place is no exception. Tonight we are going to talk about the Chateau de Veauce. And I had never heard of this place before. Adam brought it up, and I said, "Yeah, we'll go look at it." Now, it is a castle, but it carries a reputation because of the the paranormal reports have spanned such a huge period of time.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah, it's not like last 5 years or something.
Right. So weird stuff has been going on here for decades, and we're going to look into it and see if we can figure out why, and tell you a little bit about this place, dig into some of the history, and you'll understand. Yeah, this could create a haunted castle.
Yep.
So Adam, let's dig into the history of the Chateau de Veauce.
Okay, so as we always say, go down in the bottom of our show notes. You can find where we found all this information, and you can continue researching it. Everything we talk about, we reference in those show notes, so you can find those links down at the bottom. Just scroll all the way down. Now, before we get started on it, I'm just going to say, if you hear heavy breathing, it is not a ghost in my house, and it's not me. Sure. I'm watching my dad's dogs, and Ruger is a giant golden doodle, and he likes to come in here occasionally and go, and then turn around and walk out. So if you hear that, that's Ruger. Just kind of wave. You'll probably hear his collar at some point, but also forgive our French pronunciations.
Oh yeah.
I looked up how to pronounce these on the internet. So if I'm really off, it's the internet's fault. If I'm just a little bit off, it's my fat tongue's fault. So I apologize. Yeah. But I'm going to do my best. So we'll get into it. Now, Chateau de Veauce is a very old castle in the village of Veauce, France. Now, it's north of Clermont-Ferrand and west of the main route to Paris. So the nearest major city to it is Vichy, which is approximately 40 kilometers away. So they've got a train though that connects Paris to Lyon, and it's runs through Veauce. Mm-hmm. Now, Veauce has been well documented in official registries and archives. The Monuments Historiques file describes the castle as a medieval fortress with later adaptations. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it just gets right into it. That's what it is. It's a medieval fortress that has been built on later. So, they documented it in the official documents well, I think. Now, the chateau is composed of 4 wings arranged around a central courtyard. It's got structures dating from the medieval period all the way through the 19th century. So some of the features that you see right away when you look at it is a high keep. They've got defensive towers, curtain walls, a clock tower, and a large terrace that has panoramic views of the city of Veauce. Now, the interiors have 19th century salon looks, galleries, and there's a small chapel, and there's also some remnants of medieval kitchens and cellars that are still around. And, you know, to me, those medieval kitchens and cellars and stuff are fascinating, because we've taken some tours of old houses that, like, from the 1800s in the U.S., and the way the kitchens are set up and everything, it's fascinating. So medieval kitchens, from the pictures I have seen, fascinate me just as much. Just the way they structured things, what they used to prepare the food or store the food, all that. It's fascinating when you look at what we've got and you're like, oh, I put that in the fridge. They didn't have a fridge. So right, where did they put it? A lot of the stuff went to the cellar where it was cooler. Yeah. But how did they preserve things, and just the quote unquote equipment that they have in there, all hand cranked equipment, but still fascinating. Now, the surrounding park that surrounds the chateau spans over 8 hectares And there was a ton of old, impressive-looking trees there, and the River Veauce runs right through the estate. So you're standing out in the yard looking, and you can see the River Veauce running through. Now, the earliest parts of the castle, like I mentioned, date back to around 808. Not 1,800. 808.
808. Yeah.
And this was...
It's old.
Yeah, it's like we've said many times. We think we have old stuff in the U.S. It doesn't hold a candle to Europe.
Right.
So
yeah, not even close.
No. So you've got some crazy old things in Europe, and this is one of them. It dates back to 808, which was during the reign of Charlemagne. Mm-hmm. And it was part of the kingdom of Aquitaine. So let's look at some timelines. I've got some timelines. First one is the development of the chateau and some of the people who controlled the area. So in the early 11th century, a stone castle was established here to control the contested frontier between Auvergne, Berry, and Bourbonnais. Now, the fortress was expanded in the 11th and 13th centuries with additional towers, curtain walls, defensive features, and stuff like that. Well, in the 15th century, the lordship of Veauce was elevated to a barony under Louis II of Bourbon. And I am Adam I of Bourbon just because I love bourbon.
Yeah.
I'm going to start calling myself that when getting drinks for me and Ashley. I'll be like, well, Adam I of Bourbon is having a bourbon. And then she can just roll her eyes and ignore me like normal. But I'm trying to get that started. Adam I of Bourbon. So if y'all want to get that going, please do. I'd be happy to answer to that. Anyways, the estate was transformed in the 16th and 17th centuries, and it gained more residential and decorative features, including a new main building and a landscaped park that I mentioned a second ago. Now, the chateau underwent big restorations in the 19th century under Charles de Chateau de Veauce, who modernized the interiors and added what they call neo-Gothic and neo-Renaissance elements. The park was also redesigned by the noted landscape architect Count de Chaulieu. And that I had to look that up because I would have said Chowlot.
Yeah. A landscape artist.
Mm-hmm.
Back then.
Yeah. But, I mean, this was still like, this was the 19th century, so it wasn't that long ago, but yeah.
I think it was a long time ago for a landscape artist. If you told me that there was a landscape artist, back in, 1930, I'd have been like, really?
Yeah, right. True.
I would have figured, maybe, this is the guy that invented the hedge maze, Okay.
Yeah. Yep. But you're right. And landscape architect to me is something that when I hear, I think, yeah, that's France.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Where else would you have a landscape architect? You got landscapers here in the U.S., which do fantastic jobs. But to call someone a landscape architect or landscape artist, that's totally French.
Oh, yeah.
100%. Now, in the 20th century, the castle became famous for the legend of Lucy, which we'll discuss more later. Just keep that in your mind. Now, the property changed hands several times, and it faced periods of neglect and urgent need for restoration. But over the centuries, Veauce passed through many aristocratic hands. And surviving records list the seigneurs and barons of Veauce like this, and we'll go through this real quick. Up to the mid-14th century, the Veauce family itself owned the chateau, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. Now, the 14th and 15th century, it went to the House of St. Julien, Early 15th was Robert Dauphine and his heir Jean de Chouvigny. Then in the 16th century, Anne de Vienna, followed by Claude de Beaufremont. Then 1593 to 1641, Jacqueline de Lafayette owned it. And then 1641 through 1667, Claude Leloup, he was associated with apparently this, you would know Leloup in France because he was associated with that family, it says. Then we'll jump ahead a little bit. 1700s, Chateau de Veauce, and their noble line held this chateau for many generations, and had several people go through the hands of it. Now, 1971, Ephraim Tagore, he was a self-styled Baron of Veauce and an engineer of Franco-British background, purchased the chateau.
Yeah.
And
this is modern day, you know, 1971. So this guy, this is modern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. 1998 to 2002, the widow Tagore owned this place. And this is the time that the chateau started falling into disrepair.
Yeah. She didn't take care of it.
She did not take care of it. 2002 to 2015, Anne Elizabeth Mincer. And you think, wait a minute, that doesn't sound like a French name. It's not. It was a British owner. And she got renamed to Madame Mincer when she owned the property. Now, 2015 to present, it's owned by a nonprofit trust to oversee restorations and cultural activities and stuff. But through all that, you see that there was a bunch of families, or dynasties as they call them, that controlled the chateau over the years. And the Cadier barons, probably the most enduring one that lived here. And they had a hand in restoring it back in the day and all that. But the chateau story kind of goes along with the story of the region. So as things happened in the region and to the town of Veauce, the chateau had a big hand in it.
Yeah.
The location made it strategically important because it watched over the disputed borderlands in medieval France. And in the late Middle Ages, the castle was entangled in Bourbonnais politics. You know, the elevation to a barony was part of Louis II de Bourbon's recognition of the local fiefs in the area. Now, after the fall of the Bourbon Constable, Veauce became a royal domain. Then, during the French Revolution, the chateau drew official attention, it says. So, on June 20th, 1794, the revolutionary agent Antoine Carriol inspected the castle in the name of the Convention, enforcing the January 1794 decree that abolished feudal privileges. So there's no record of major combat that took place at Veauce, but like a lot of the, quote, noble estates back then, it was temporarily nationalized and sold as a what they call bien national during the Revolution. Now, in the 19th century, Veauce was again prominent in Bourbonnais society, and Baron Charles de Cadier rebuilt it with imperial support. So apparently he was a friend of Napoleon III's half-brother, and so he used that to kind of, you know.
Napoleon III's half-brother.
Mm-hmm. So
what a connection.
Right.
What is it? I was your grandfather's brother's nephew's college roommate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. But one of the families that owned this was the Dion family. So we need to look at Baron Guy de Dion because he plays an important role in the history of this place. Now, Baron Guy de Dion, 1530 to 1585, he was a prominent French nobleman during the 16th century. He held a bunch of significant titles, and he played a huge role in the political and military affairs during the time. So this was an important guy. So let's look at a few of the titles that he held. So he was Baron of Veauce. He was Count of Lude. He was the governor of Poitou, the general of Anjou, and Knight of the King's Order. Now, that's pretty impressive for one man to have all those. He was either a really good dude or a butt kisser.
Yeah.
One of the two to get all those titles.
Maybe a little of both.
Maybe a little of both. Now, in 1559, Guy de Dion married Jacqueline de Lafayette. And you remember the Lafayettes from earlier. Jacqueline hailed from the distinguished Lafayette family, known for their noble lineage and influence in French history, this says. Well, during the French Wars of Religion, Guy de Dion played a crucial role in defending royal interests. So, the defense of Poitou, he was notably present in defending the city against the Protestant forces led by Admiral Gaspard II de this is one I didn't get, Coligny. And he collaborated with Henry I, Duke of Guy. So their effort ended up being successful in repelling the siege. And this says it marked a significant victory for the Catholic royalist. So Guy de Dion was a powerful man living during the 16th century in Chateau de Veauce.
Yeah. All right. So considering all the history, you can kind of understand, all these different people, all these different families, and the age of the building, it lends itself to become a haunted castle. Okay. So, the history is so entrenched in, medieval times and feudalism and so forth.
I love that restaurant.
There was, yeah, they march around and everything. You would believe that there were some stories that came out of this, that would go, oh yeah, I bet that's haunted. And that's where the most famous ghost story of Chateau de Veauce comes from. And that is probably one of France's most documented hauntings. Okay. And that would be the story of Lucy, who was a young servant girl, who died a tragic death in the 16th century. So why would Lucy stick around this place? Well, let's talk about it. According to the most widely accepted version of events, Lucy was a pretty young domestic worker in the castle during the 17th century. She caught the eye of Baron Guy de Dion, who was many years older than she was.
Right.
But,
yeah.
16th, 17th century, age was just a number, right?
Yeah, right.
He was a baron, she was a servant. If he decided you're the one, guess what?
Yep.
But he fell hopelessly in love with Lucy. And the situation became complicated when the baron was called away to war. which left Lucy alone in the castle with his jealous wife, the Baroness Jacqueline de Lafayette.
Mm-hmm.
So the Baroness, consumed with jealousy over her husband's obvious affection for this young servant girl, took revenge while he was away at war. She had Lucy thrown into the castle's dungeon, which eventually led to her death of cold and hunger.
Sure.
Now, after her death, Lucy was buried within the walls of one of the castle's 5 towers. You want a haunted castle? This is how you get a haunted castle.
100%.
Now, there's an alternative story to how Lucy died. And some of the villagers suggest that she didn't die of cold and hunger. She threw herself out of the window of one of the towers. Because she was afraid that she was going to be forced to marry the much older Baron. Either way, it really doesn't matter. We've got a story of this young servant girl dying a tragic death inside the castle and then being buried within its walls.
Yeah. Not just, and when Matt says buried within its walls, he doesn't mean buried in the ground within the walls of the compound.
Oh, no. Yeah.
He means inside a wall.
In the walls. Yeah. Which was not an uncommon thing, but in this case,
it also wasn't super common.
Right. I mean, well,
it had been done, but it's not.
Well, okay. Well, let me rephrase. So if a baron that had served his country well and brought this castle to, a great standing, they might be buried inside the castle with a marker and kind of a memorial. Lucy was not given such respect. Right. She was her body was essentially thrown in and bricked up, okay, to be forgotten about.
Yep.
But
hiding evidence.
Yeah, according to a lot of people, Lucy was not going to be forgotten. So people that have seen Lucy's apparition, or at least an apparition that they attribute to Lucy, they say that she is typically described as appearing with distinctive red hair, and the paintings that show her there are paintings that show her on the castle walls. The legend suggests that Lucy periodically returns to haunt the castle, and she has allegedly been seen by thousands of visitors over the centuries.
Yeah.
Okay, not just recently, over centuries. There are stories that recount seeing the image of this young servant girl roaming through the castle.
And I think that's important that you're saying over the centuries, because a lot of people, they think, oh, all of these hauntings started, within the last 50 years or something. No, a lot of these hauntings, especially in Europe, started centuries ago.
Right.
And we just have more documentation.
That's it.
About it within the last 50 years or so.
Yeah. They're better documented and there's more interest. But there were always stories, people that said, you don't go to that place. It's haunted. They buried this servant girl that was messing around with the Baron in the walls.
Yep.
That's
so of
bad
course
juju.
She's still there.
Right. Now, the accounts of personal encounters with Lucy and other spirits at Chateau de Veauce are particularly compelling because they come from a variety of sources. So castle owners, guests, and other family members have all had reports of encountering Lucy. During the 1980s, when the castle was owned by Ephraim Tagore, the ghost stories reached new heights of of publicity, the ghost stories reached new heights of publicity. Tagore claimed that Lucy's apparition frequently appeared after midnight, wandering through the many halls of the massive castle. And it is massive. Go check out some pictures of it. It's humongous.
Yeah, it is.
One of the most dramatic encounters occurred when the castle was operating as a bed and breakfast under the ownership of Elizabeth Mincer, who purchased the property in 2002. A guest had just settled into his room when he came running downstairs in terror, claiming that a young girl was in his bed. Mincer quietly accompanied the frightened guest back to his room, where they found no girl present. But she did observe something that gave her pause. There was a very visible dent in the down duvet, and its outline was much smaller than the man who had been sleeping there. But the guest was so thoroughly frightened by the experience that he grabbed his belongings and left immediately, forfeiting his night stay.
Yep. He's like, screw that.
Yeah, I mean,
man.
you know, you stay in a haunted hotel and you get really spooked, there's no chance that you're going to sleep there. So you might as well leave, you know.
Yeah.
You just, instead of suffering all night long with lack of sleep, just go on.
Yeah. Now, it way different for him because he wasn't going in knowing, oh, this is a haunted hotel.
Right.
And I'm going to enjoy being in a haunted hotel. He just went in and realized it was haunted.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because like you, I have slept at haunted hotels, but I went in knowing it was haunted.
Yeah, exactly.
So I was able to get some sleep. But yeah, if I went in someplace and then just all of a sudden an apparition appeared in my bed, darn skippy, I'm getting out of there.
That's right. That's right. The encounters, though, aren't limited to Lucy alone. Current owner's family members have reported seeing other apparitions, including a 50-year-old woman with her hair arranged in a bun. And these sightings suggest that multiple spirits may inhabit the castle, which makes sense given its long and often turbulent history spanning over a millennium. Now, Elizabeth Mincer, despite initially being skeptical about whether Lucy was real or if the previous owner had artificially enhanced the ghost story for tourism purposes, eventually had her own experiences. Her perspective as a rational owner who tried to downplay the supernatural events makes her eventually acknowledge all the strange occurrences. And, you know, that's the best kind of witness, is the
Agreed.
one I'm skeptic. I don't believe it. I think this was all made up. And then you have that experience to go, okay, I'm a believer now.
Yep,
I've seen it with my own two eyes.
I was wrong. Sorry.
Yep. And you got to understand, in 1972, when Ephraim Tagore purchased the chateau, he really played up this paranormal aspect of it. In fact, he played it up so much that people thought it was just a joke, or it was just a way to draw attention to himself or to the chateau. So it got out, and there was a radio DJ in 1984. His name was Jean-Yves Casca. And so we're gonna call him JY for the rest of this. Just so I don't have to stumble over his name. So he hosted a radio show, and people would call in and, you know, tell these weird stories. He had been doing research trying to find a legitimate haunted house that he could go investigate. I mean, this is 84. This is before Paranormal State and Ghost Adventures. I mean, ghost hunting really wasn't a thing. And so this guy's on the radio in France, and he's looking to do exactly that. And that's when he starts hearing stories about Ephraim Tagore and Chateau de Veauce. Now, he got a call from a self-proclaimed historian named René Crozet, and he tells him he knows that this story will interest him. And so he starts telling him the stories about Lucy and the chateau.
Yeah.
So JY, he goes, okay, I'm going to talk to this guy. So he talks to the Baron Tagore. He was a self-assigned Baron.
Yeah.
You know, you got to understand, this dude was kind of over the top.
Sure.
And he was very flowery when he described his own life. Okay, he described himself as a poet, and he said that he used to be a spy.
He was just a poet because he rhymed a couple words.
And so he had all this. Oh, he just exaggerated so much about himself that it began to overshadow the ghost story. To go, his ghost story is full of fluff too. Just like him.
Right.
And so JY began to think, I don't know. This sounds like a guy just blowing a lot of hot air. But as he looked into it, he found regional newspapers that documented some of these weird happenings that went on in the castle. So he said, okay, I'm going to check it out. And he thought going in that just having the Baron himself on his show was going to be worthy of having the show.
Sure.
This guy was larger than life character. Okay. So he said, at worst case scenario, I've just got this wild, loony dude to have on the show.
Which that's most radio shows anyway. They
exactly.
Just get these extravagant people to come talk about stuff. So.
Yep. You got it. So 2 weeks later, JY gets a French sound engineer and gets a film crew, and they go out to the chateau. And honestly, he's impressed. He's like, man, this place is, it's way more than I thought it would be.
Mm-hmm.
And he's beginning to look around, and he says that the Baron is just like you would picture him. He's like, he said, he would expect, a monocle and a big mustache and a central French accent, and he said, but this guy is very welcoming and has a long conversation and tells JY that he's met this ghost of this young woman named Lucy multiple times in the chateau. So many, in fact, that he can't even remember the first time that he's seen her. Okay? And he describes her as this very bright shape that if you see it often enough, you can begin to see the outline of a young woman. And then he tells the story of Lucy and how she died and how she came to be buried within the chateau. And so JY's like, okay, this is pretty good. But yet, as he talks to the current villagers around the area in Veauce, they're all like, we haven't seen anything. We've not seen anything. We've not heard nothing other than this blowhard talking about it. This is all we know. But so now he's really beginning to think, oh, man, he pulled me in. He really got me with this big charismatic character that he's playing, and nobody else can back the story up. But just like you think, the story takes a turn.
Yep. So
as JY is about to just, say, well, this was a bust. They're there one night, and JY gets a call from one of his sound engineers that he's been having technical issues throughout the night. And that one of the speakers had blown, and there was a tape recorder that had come unplugged. And so now the tape recorder was jamming So they said, all right, well, let's just call it a night and come back tomorrow. And they go back to their hotel, and as they're talking together, JY and this sound guy, he's like, the sound guy and the TV people are beginning to feel kind of weird. You know, they don't feel right. You know, they're like, you know, what happened while we were there? And they're getting a little nervous. So JY goes back the next night, and this time he brings a medium. And the medium's name is Raymond Rayant. And he's pretty famous, but he's kind of past his prime. And he brought his 9-year-old granddaughter with him. And so they do another tour. And the granddaughter, whose name was Aurora, she gets scared. She says she feels like she's being watched and followed. Okay? And they split up into groups like Scooby-Doo. And the medium and Aurora and the TV crew, they all go together. But the Baron was no part of this. Okay? This was them on their own. The Baron he stayed away. Now, as they were trying to dig up something, as the medium was trying to make a connection, the medium points out this bright light through one of the windows, and it continues to get brighter and brighter, and everybody in the group is seeing it, and they're beginning to be just awestruck by this bright light that keeps getting bigger. And Aurora gets scared, and she screams, and she calls out Lucy's name. And the TV journalist that was with them sees it too, and he starts to freak out. And they start taking pictures of this bright shape that's coming toward the TV crew. And then it suddenly disappears. And the sound guy says there was a woman scream or a human scream in his headphones. So much that he thought something had happened to one of the people in the group. So he's looking around, taking his headphones off, and none of them had heard it. It was only in his headphones.
Yep.
Okay. So now everyone is freaked out. Everyone is shocked.
I love this story so much.
Everyone is shocked. Everyone is freaked out. And the Baron, he is ecstatic. I mean, he is loving it because now they've all seen what he's been telling them goes on. And a couple of days after, JY, he is stunned because there's 5 different people who absolutely swear that they saw something. But when he listens back to the audio tapes, he's like, man, the medium is the only one that's staying calm. Everybody else is wigging out. And he's like, did this medium pull some baloney on me? I mean, he's still very skeptical of this whole situation. And he's like, okay, so the medium's doing this and the medium's doing this, but he can't explain the scream in the sound guy's headphones. He was like, he couldn't have done that. He couldn't have made it. And he's like, one of the mics actually began to like fry, and steam was coming out of it. He said the only way this mic could have done it is if it was exposed to burning hot steam. And the mic should have stopped working at that point, but it didn't. It kept working. So he feels like JY feels like he's missed something. So he released a 5-part series on the events that happened over the 2 nights. Okay. And unfortunately, it's all in French. But this is the basic story. So you don't have to go back and watch it. It's just a lot of really weird, bizarre events that happened during JY's investigation. So this is one of the earliest paranormal investigations, at least documented, that we have. And it took place at potentially the most haunted place in France.
Right.
So pretty cool. I mean, you know, when I found this, I was like, this is too interesting not to share. I know it's long, but I was like, this is like the documentation from an OG ghost adventure. You know?
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, I looked and I could not find a standalone downloadable audio file of that Lucy scream in the mic. I looked for days, and I just looked again while you were talking about it, and still don't see it. But you can go find it if you want to hear it in some other shows.
Yeah.
I've got the link to one, but it's in French.
Yep.
But it's got the audio clip if you want to hear it.
Yeah.
But it's eerie.
Oh, yeah.
I've heard it. It's very eerie. And the reason I love this is because it's one of the earliest EVP type recordings that we've got.
Yeah.
And it's a widely publicized EVP.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's probably one of the most famous.
Yeah, true. And all it is a scream and some distortion. But it's amazing how they acquired it.
Yeah.
Because it was like as she walked through the mic, it created that sound. Right. And it just happened to pick her up.
Yeah.
And dude, first time I heard this, I'll tell you, this is the reason. This story is the reason that I pitched Chateau de Veauce to you.
No kidding, really?
Because of this story.
Yeah. I mean, it is fascinating, and when you know the story behind the EVP, behind the scream, you know that the only guy that heard it when it was happening was the sound guy who was wearing headphones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and nobody else heard it, but they all saw the light pass through, and what should have destroyed a microphone as it went through didn't. I mean, with visible steam coming out of a microphone, you'd think that thing's fried. It's done for.
Yeah. And
it didn't. It kept working. So it is really, really strange. But because of this story, the paranormal activity at Chateau de Veauce has attracted some serious scientific attention over the decades. And there have been multiple professional investigations documenting unexplained phenomena. And like we said, this was the first, which took place in 1984. But professional paranormal teams returned to the castle in 2008 and again in 2014, providing a timeline of consistent supernatural activity spanning 3 decades.
Mm-hmm.
And while the later investigations did not capture distinct visual apparitions of Lucy, they documented other forms of paranormal evidence that corroborated the haunted castle, the castle's haunted reputation. And most intriguing comes from audio recordings made from these investigations. Researchers documented unexplainable sounds occurring in a room called John's Room during both the 2008 and 2014 investigations. Now, what makes this evidence particularly compelling is that the recorded sounds occurred at the same frequency and tonality during both separate investigations. Okay? You know, we're talking about investigations that are 6 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
And researchers say that this suggests a consistent supernatural presence rather than a random environmental noise. So if you were just picking up random noise, there is no way in 6 years' time that you would be able to pick up the same random noise at the same frequency and tone.
Mm-hmm.
That the odds of that happening are just astronomical. So the consistency of the paranormal evidence across multiple decades and different investigation teams lend some credibility to the claims of supernatural activity in this castle. And the fact that professional researchers with scientific equipment have documented unexplained phenomena suggests that something genuinely unusual is happening at Chateau de Veauce. And, they the folklore and everything is fascinating, but there's much more to it than just the stories, and that's what makes it so compelling. So, like we said, the history intersecting with the paranormal at Chateau de Veauce is what makes this place, so special and so unique. The castle story goes all the way from Charlemagne, through the medieval barons, and all the way up to modern paranormal investigations. And Lucy's story, whether she died from imprisonment or jumped to escape an unwanted marriage, it's lasted for over 450 years. And it continues to come up and be retold. And it's influenced, believers and skeptics alike. But the strength of the Veauce hauntings is not just in these ghost stories, but like I said, in the consistency.
Right.
Different witnesses from different backgrounds, from different time periods, and the documentation provided by all of these different investigations really support the fact that Chateau de Veauce has got some actual paranormal activity going on in there. And, I don't have the current information, but, it's been up for sale.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't really seem to distract any buyers that this place is probably haunted. I would think you would get probably a few more bids on it because it's haunted and because of these stories and the potential that you would have to, at the minimum, open it up and provide a place for additional investigations to occur.
Dude, if I had the money and was in the market for a chateau,
oh yeah,
I would definitely want to get a haunted one.
No kidding.
Because, like you said, the potentials with that, put a little money in, fix it up, and you have a haunted hotel that people will pay to come stay at.
Right. And you and I, we have seen, we've been to events like this. We've been invited to go to events like this where the place pretty much just stands to cater to paranormal investigators.
Yeah.
And I imagine that in some way it is a lucrative way to make an old building earn a little bit of money for you.
Sure.
But I thought this place was cool. And Adam, to his credit, did not give me the story about JY and the radio show going out there and investigating. So when I came across it, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool. So, I had a lot of fun with this. I don't think this was a place that I would have come across on my own, and I'm kind of wondering how in the hell Adam came across it.
Yeah, because normally I'm the cryptid finder and you're the haunted place finder, but yeah.
But it's pretty cool. But let us know what you think. Does all of the consistency and the time frame of all of this, does it convince you that maybe there is something paranormal going on at Chateau de Veauce? Or do you just kind of shuck it off and just go, it's just a lot of different ghost stories from a really old castle? Let us know. And the best place to do that is in our Facebook group. And we've got thousands of members in there responding to stuff from the show or telling jokes or asking for help with situations they have. It's just a great place to come and share these type of stories and conversations. Don't forget to check out our website, which is graveyardpodcast.com. And there you can find links to purchase Graveyard Tales merchandise. You can listen to the show and you can become a patron. And just remember, we have a ton of bonus content, Patreon shows, side quest. It's a great time to go check that out and help the show.
Mm-hmm.
And please don't forget to make sure that if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, please make sure that your button to automatically download shows is clicked back like it was before, because that really helps us and it makes it easier for people to find the show.
Yep.
And for us to get credit for the work that we've done.
Right.
So until next time, we'll save you a seat in the graveyard.
See you soon.